Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. We are going to be talking about caregiving for a spouse and finding gratitude in caregiving today with our interview with Diane Shu. She is a caregiver herself, and she is someone who also coaches caregivers as well. So we're so excited to have her here with us in just a few moments. Now, before we get her on, I wanted to let you guys know that signups for our big open Zoom workshop, How to Stop the Four Most Common Challenging Dementia Behaviors, is happening right now. All right. So go to the link in my bio if you would have demonstrations. We have a lot of free prizes and a lot of great stuff. And it's totally free to join, so definitely join. Hi, Diane. Welcome.
Hello, hi, thank you so much.
Uh
Thank you
oh,
for this invitation.
not hearing you. Let's see if I
Uh,
take off my headphones.
I
All
can hear
right, tell
you.
us in the chat if you guys can hear us. Um, I'm not sure if I can. All right. Okay.
I
All right. Hi. Okay. All right, so welcome. Okay, good. Okay, so we hear okay. All right,
okay, good.
great. All right, so welcome.
Thank
Good to
you
have
so
you.
much.
Yeah, so introduce yourself real quick, and
Sure.
for those who may be
Yeah,
new to you, and well, because it looks like we have quite a few folks from you as well. So yeah, share really quick.
sure. Okay. Well, I go by Dementia Coach Diane from recent events, relatively recent events with my husband. He We've been together over 50 years, but he started developing signs of Lewy body dementia probably as early as 2015. And I've been his primary caregiver now, I'd say, since things got pretty intense in 2021. And I started to share our journey earlier this year, which I have to confess, I went kicking and screaming because I didn't have the best opinion of social media. Being from my generation, I think I had posted once on Facebook in 20 years, but I just felt like I had to do something, and I started to share our journey. And I happen to be a life coach as well, so I think it was that opportunity to really put every life coaching practice I ever discussed with a client into practice myself. And so I've been sharing both the tips that I've gained in terms of how to take care of someone living with dementia at home, as well as tips for the caregivers to take care of themselves, because we all hear about putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first, but truly, how do we do that, day to day? That's part of what I try to share and get conversations going about. So I have a truly amazing community that is my most amazing support group every day.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And for those of you who may not know who I am, I'm Krista. I run Dementia Success Path, which is a resource for folks who are wanting to learn how to deal with challenging dementia behaviors, like I want to go home, or them getting super angry, or them refusing to eat, refusing showers, on and on and on. I was just telling everybody as well. We have a free Zoom workshop coming up September 17th, 19th. Sign up is in the link in my bio on how to stop the four most common challenging behaviors. So, with all that being said, I know you mentioned a little bit about your story and your intro, but just share with us a little bit how you got into how your caregiver journey got started
Yeah,
with your
well,
husband.
yeah, it was pretty intense because it seemed to happen almost overnight. I mean, if I look back and I look at what the symptoms were, they said they probably started as early as 2015, but Ben's a musician. And so, and I came from science and then a corporate background. Then I got into life coaching, but I tend to be much more left brain oriented. So a lot of the early symptoms I was kind of writing off to him being so right brain. I mean, when he asked me to summarize a movie, 5 times in 2 hours, I was like, he's just not paying attention. And, and I think once I even said to him, honey, I just answered that question. Like, but you just asked me 4 or 5 times. And he actually, I remember the night he turned to me and he said, well, are you writing a song in your head? And I was like, no, I'm not. So it really went, I guess, undetected for a long time until I think some of his friends actually started to notice it even before I did, because
Mm.
they said, Diane, Ben was saying things like, "Oh, you just moved into your house and haven't you been there like 25 years?" I was like, yeah. So, but it still wasn't coming out with me until it was like almost overnight in June of 21, when like one morning I was in my office and he comes in and thought I was his mom. I'm
Mm.
like, what? So unfortunately, well, what it is what it is. But the first 18 months, he had, it was so confusing, honestly, and we couldn't get a diagnosis. I couldn't get him to get to the doctors. I'm sure it's one of the most challenging uh, behaviors with some people living with dementia is they don't think anything's wrong, and so they refuse to get help. Um, and he started having episodes, which I now know are called the imposter syndrome in Lewy body dementia, where he did not recognize me. And
Mm.
he's standing there like he would recognize my sister, but he didn't recognize me.
Mm.
It was truly bizarre. And, he'd say, like, well, you look like Diane, but you're not Diane. And
Mm.
I must have stayed in a hotel, honestly, about 25 times in like 2022. It was terrifying. It's the only
Wow.
word I know to use. I mean, I think I'm still dealing, honestly, with some of the PTSD from all that, because I was afraid to leave him alone, but he wanted me out of the house. And there was no reasoning with him whatsoever. And, as things will sometimes happen, we ended up in the emergency room in Christmas of 22. And because I had to call the police. I mean, you get to the point where you think you can never do something, and then you have to. And I had to say, he was beating me with a broomstick because he didn't recognize me. He was like, "What's this person doing in my house?" So we ended up in the hospital, and without going into all the gory details, I mean, um, he got placed on medication. Then he started having a reaction to the medication. Then he was back in the hospital like a few months later. But I guess thankfully, I'll say, we actually got a neurologist on board, um, who at least put the story together and did his best to diagnose Lewy body. And I had said at the time, do we really need to get a definitive diagnosis? Is it going to change the treatment? And he's like, no. Then I said, well, then I'm not putting Ben through that. I said, we'll just have to take it as it comes. So he went home from the hospital at that point, and the medications did seem to help. I hesitate to use the word stabilize, but they did seem to help. But honestly, I don't know what stopped the imposter syndrome episodes other than prayer. I mean, Chris, I honestly don't know how else to explain it. And the doctor couldn't explain it either. I was like, I don't know. So thankfully, because he recognizes me now, and he has for over 18 months, I guess, since like the last episode was in February of 23, I've been able to take care of him at home. And I do have caregiver help. There's no way I could do this on my own. I do. And I'm deeply grateful for resources to be able to do that, because we fall in that zone where, have too many resources for Medicaid and not enough for help. But for right now, this is, we're making it. And in fact, it was something that you said that I picked up on one of your posts, which you said about how important it was to network. And one of the biggest mistakes that people do coming into this phase of their life is they allow themselves to get isolated and they don't network, so that when they need help, they're stuck.
Yeah.
But but through networking, I did actually find some people to help me. So I haven't, not that going through an agency would be bad, but I haven't had to do that, which has been amazing. So I'm going to say, number one thing, if you're not already doing it, start talking to people and seeing who might
Yes.
be available to help, because a lot of times, and thankfully Ben doesn't have any other medical problems, so we don't need a medical professional necessarily. He needs companionship. He needs someone who's willing to help him with his meals and help him with with some personal care things and everything. So I am, again, just doubly blessed that I found some people that I'm going to actually say love him as much as I do. It's just, I could get teary eyed about that. It's been amazing. So yeah, so the thing is, I did start, I guess being a coach and still being relatively isolated. We don't have children. I have family, but they're not very close by. I had to do something, and some of the support groups that I had looked into were so discouraging.
Mm,
To be honest with
mm.
you, it was like,
Yeah, and
oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick.
yeah.
I see in our chat, Luis says networking how. So what does networking look like when it comes to getting help that isn't necessarily paid?
Yeah, well, like for instance, I talked to my neighbor, about like, do you know anybody? And especially, they said when you're coming to like somebody my age, for instance. I mean, I'm not quite 70, but I'm up there, but I'm healthy and I'm strong. And there are people out there that are maybe they're retired, but they are strong. They still want to do something. They need the companionship too. So I mean, literally, start talking to people about who they know that might have the capacity and the willingness to help you. And the other thing is like nursing students, for
Mm,
instance. I mean, I've talked
yeah,
to
it's a
people
great idea.
who, have had nursing students come in and even stay with their loved one overnight.
Wow.
So and for like far, far less than you'd be paying a professional caregiver. So
Yeah.
I think we limit ourselves when we immediately go to, oh, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
And it's there's a mindset and a paradigm for caregivers that we have to be stressed out, we have to be exhausted, and we die before the person we're taking care of. I mean, that's prevalent in our culture. And quite honestly, I would love to change that paradigm. But one of the ways to do it is to start to think, hey, there's help out there. There's energy to be exchanged. Who knows if you could barter with somebody? Who knows if you have something they might want? It doesn't even have to be money. But we need to open up our minds. For me, I need to pray continuously for guidance and start to talk to people about what your needs are. And that's what worked for me, so
Absolutely. And I would even go beyond that too. So let's say you're in a position, I'd say the very, very best position you can possibly be in is your person just got diagnosed. And the reason being is that you have more time to reach out to folks in your community. Like you were mentioning your neighbors, the local colleges, local
churches,
churches. Uh,
absolutely, yeah.
that's a huge one. Yeah, like you said, there's probably a wealth of folks that are in, like maybe the elders of that community who are looking for exactly what you're saying. I saw somebody in chat ask about background checks and drug screenings. I would say it's a little trickier when you're trying to get that done uh, with a volunteer. Likely you'd probably have to pay for that
Yeah,
if
probably.
if you
Yeah.
were if you were needing that, or if you're just like, I just don't trust whoever the church sends or what have you. Maybe definitely going through an agency may be
Of
something that
course.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And start with that so that you can maybe take your time to, do some more research. I mean,
yeah,
I
definitely.
for me, I I was really in need and I just kind of had to go with it, and
Yeah,
but they were people recommended by people I trusted. So it's
yeah,
so far it's really worked. But I certainly understand you have to be
yeah,
cautious. But as I said, but I think the mindset is really important to don't write it off, and just to say, yeah, I can't afford it, because that's one of the ways I put the oxygen mask on myself first. I mean, it's like
yeah.
I have to sleep.
Yeah, that is so so smart. Like honestly, I hear so often just folks just being scared that they'll be a burden or that they'll be rejected, or they so many people hyperfixate on like my brother should be doing this or something
Oh,
like that, and it's
let it
just like you
let
can't.
it go.
Yeah,
Just let it go. I mean, it's like it's almost like, for me, being a caregiver is like being in a PhD program for personal recovery.
mm.
All your, excuse my French, all your shit's in your face.
Yeah,
It really is. All codependent behaviors and victim mentality, and I mean, it can just be so much in your face, and you're like, wow. I guess I'm just selfish enough and stubborn enough that I said, I'm not going down with the ship. And I know Ben wouldn't want it that
Yeah.
way. I mean, there's just no way. And I also know he would do the same thing for me, if the situation was reversed. So just continually letting go of resentments and fears and anxieties, and clear, for me at least, clearing enough space to receive, call it your intuition, call it divine guidance, like what's the next best thing to do right now, because I have to take care of myself. I have to. And it's been a daunting journey, no doubt about it. But just today, I keep up sessions with my own coach. For instance, I do, I take care of myself. I do, and I have she does grief counseling with me, and things that I've really needed to continue to clear out. And she said to me today, because I was so tired. I admit I didn't sleep much last night. It happens, and the fear and anxiety can start to come up. And part of me was saying, like, oh my gosh, isn't that like ever going to go away? And she was like, well, no, probably not. Um, but she said, you're not the same person you were a year ago. I'm not. I have expanded and I have grown and I have a bigger capacity than I ever thought I would have for this journey. And
Yeah.
I have had more moments of deep gratitude than I ever really thought I would have, living something so intense like my husband living with dementia. So it's to me, self-care, self-love are one and the same thing. And it's whatever's in the way of you loving yourself enough to take care of yourself. Get some help to let go of that, or come check out my videos. I try to talk about that kind of stuff a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, I know you started this gratitude series on your page. So I guess talk to me a little bit how that got started and what benefits you've found for keeping, like, you've essentially done an online gratitude journal, but for those of us who are watching, it could just be something you write on your phone or in a notebook or whatever.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I think most of us are all aware of the fact that gratitude is, we'd like to feel grateful, right? It feels good to feel grateful. Not always easy to access, let's face it,
Sure.
especially when you're dealing with really tough stuff. And, do I wake up and feel grateful the minute I open my eyes? No, I don't. It's a choice and it's a practice. And I decided, I was doing it on my own, but I think one of the things that I've benefited from so much from social media, and that has really turned my opinion around, is the power of doing it
Mm,
together, and to recognizing you are not alone in how you're feeling. And yes, this is an intense journey that's like a roller coaster ride in any given day of emotions all over the place. But I decided, you know what? I said, let's do this practice online. I said, and I thought, 21 days of gratitude. It takes at least 21 days to start to get into a habit. I mean, we've all heard that too,
mm,
and so, because we're trying to build new neural networks, and when you're in a really stressful situation like caregiving, it's hard not to feel negative. You're tired, you're frustrated, the fear can come up, and and fear is a survival mechanism. So the brain is going to go to survival first. So we're never going to not feel fearful. The trick is to recognize when that comes up, to say, is there something, is there anything in the moment right now that I need to be afraid of? Is a saber-toothed tiger about to jump on me or not?
mm,
And usually I'd say in this day and age, not.
sure.
So it's our thinking that's causing the anxiety and the fear. We're projecting into the future, we're hung up on the past, we're not usually in the present moment. But with a practice like gratitude, when you start to tune in to what you're grateful for in the moment, you start to build some new neural networks and create pathways in your brain that make it's like going through a path in the forest. When you first start to slash, the path through the forest, it's not easy. But if you keep it up, it gets easier and easier to go down that path. So that's what a gratitude practice will do for you if you keep it up. And the power of doing it together prompted me to say, like, yeah, let's do this together. So if anybody wants to check it out, I'm probably going to go back over my own videos and take my own advice. But I labeled it in my reels so you can, go from day 1 to 21. But I picked 5 key areas to focus our gratitude on, because sometimes it just helps. It's like, well, what am I going to focus on today? So it was our connection to the divine, our bodies, nature, other people, and the mundane things in our lives that we really miss if we didn't have them, like the garage door opener, things like that. So, but having a focus, I think, really helped, and it helped me. So I recognized that it just kind of upped my gratitude practice. And quite honestly, now when I open my eyes, I am sitting there going like, wow, yeah, I'm grateful for the blinds so I can get a few more minutes in darkness, or just silly things. Or I'm really grateful for indoor plumbing right now and I don't have far to go to the bathroom. And I find that when you start your day with gratitude and you're looking for things, to write in your journal or post, in the comments, it can stop that negative thinking pattern. It can stop the momentum. It like interrupts the pattern of negative thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
I know that makes me think so much. You were talking about at the beginning of this stream how when you joined the Facebook groups for caregivers, it was such a negative space. And I think
yeah.
that's incredible that you've reworked your brain to where you start with what is essentially is a win, which is I know how I structure the support groups that I run, which is, you start with that win so that you're
Yeah.
already thinking, what have I done right
Oh,
in
oh,
caregiving?
I think that is so huge. And in fact, I am actually putting together a workshop on self-care for
Oh,
caregivers, which
amazing.
I yeah, so if anybody's interested, they can sign up for my newsletter, which is you just go to dementiacoachdiane.com. There's a link in my profile, and it's a free newsletter. But I'm going to be announcing the release of that. And what prompted me to say, self-care, self-love, gratitude is kind of all, the most important thing is for you to start to love yourself and feel grateful for yourself and what you've done,
Yeah.
because caregiving itself is a choice. I mean, people can say like, "Oh, I had no choice. It's my child, or it's my husband, or my mom." We do have a choice.
Yeah.
We do,
There's plenty of family members who don't do a
who
darn
don't do
thing.
it right. And so when we've chosen to do it, we can just admire ourselves for being willing. And I'm going to probably tear up here, to escort somebody else at a time in their life when they need our
Yeah.
help. You know, and it's a privilege. Do I always feel that way? No, of course not. Do I
Yeah.
get caught up in my grief that I miss my husband and the way it used to be? Of course I do.
Yeah.
But I'm also
Yeah.
privileged, and I'm stronger than I ever thought I could
Yeah.
be. And I
Yeah.
am proud of myself. I'm godly proud of myself.
Yeah.
And so it's an amazing journey to self-love if you're willing to go down that path. And so that's what I want to do in this workshop. I want to be able to work with other caregivers at a more intimate level than I'm able to do on my public pages. I can't answer all the comments. I wish I could. They're amazing, but I want to work a little more intimately so we can together build a workshop and look at the techniques and practices and the mindset that will really help us to find a new level of self-love and self-care. So yeah, if you're interested, please sign up for the newsletter. I'll keep you posted, and I'm hoping to,
Awesome.
yeah. I've declared September self-care month. Actually, there
Oh,
maybe is a national self-care month somewhere, but it's also World Candle Month. So I was like, why not? I think it's a good month for
yeah. Yeah,
self-care.
absolutely. Absolutely. I know it can be so hard to be able to figure out, okay, well, how do I do all the things and how do I do all this? So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious, aside from, your gratitude practice and getting that extra support through reaching out to folks in the community, your neighbors, folks that you trust to find people in the community who can really help you with companionship with your husband. What are some other things that you've seen make a big difference? Because for those of us who are just joining at the very beginning, you were telling a very harrowing story about the beginning of your journey with your husband. Like how have you started to deal with, since obviously my niche is challenging behaviors, how
Yeah,
how did you deal with that? Because for them it's them expressing themselves, and for
oh, of
us it's
course.
like,
And
what
he
is all
had no
this?
idea. No, I know.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was, well, acceptance is huge, of course.
Mm,
Acceptance is in some ways is, and again, recognizing I came from choice because I was actually prepared to put him in a facility at one point. Um, and then, and I was horrified. I mean, I was sobbing. It was, I didn't think I could ever live with myself.
mm,
But like, it was so wild. I think it was like a surrender. And my faith is very strong. So I'm going to say for me, it was a surrender to the divine saying, I don't know what else to do.
mm.
And yet it didn't work out. Like the director of the facility I had picked out was fired and this and that happened. And then I found people to help. And it was like the way it evolved. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's that question of both acceptance and surrender. And I have used a fair amount of techniques that I used to use with my clients as a coach. There's
Mm.
one called the emotional freedom technique, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but or tapping, and
Okay.
tapping is the layman's term for it, I guess. But they're like body techniques. So I guess what I'm going to say is I use the power of my mind, my body, and my spirit to get through every day. And sometimes, as I said, tapping is actually a cool technique because it takes advantage of those acupressure points, and it helps to stimulate the parasympathetic system and really calm your nervous system down. And you can do it in seconds, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. And that uses a combination of like the body technique and affirmations. So I do things like tapping. Sometimes I do stream of consciousness journaling. I mean, sometimes I've just got to get the energy and the emotions out of my head and onto the page, and I'll take a look at my fears and really start to examine, are these real fears? Is this something I need to act on, or is this false evidence appearing real? What is it? And sometimes I'll burn that page and see it go up in smoke. I've also used uh, smashing ice cubes on the driveway. And again, as silly as that may sound, there have been times when anger will come up, or even
Mm.
rage, like I'm really tired. Something
Yeah.
will trigger me from the past. I'm doing everything in my power to take care of Ben, and it's like one more thing puts me over the edge, and I will get a bowl of ice cubes, and especially in the summer, it was great. I go outside and literally smash them in the driveway. It's so satisfying to just get the energy out of your system. I don't want to take it out on Ben. It's not his fault, but I need to get it
Yeah.
out of my system. And so there's any number of techniques, honestly, that I use. Like every day, I use different ones. So sometimes, on certain, like there was one day I was just so darn tired. I just put some tunes on the radio and I just decided to dance around the kitchen, and Ben's like looking at me. I'm like, yeah, baby, it's like come on, dance with me. And we started doing the twist together, and so I mean there are a lot of techniques to use. I was glad that I had a lot in my toolbox already because of my life coach training. I'm not sure if I would have been able to access them as quickly as I've been able to because I already had the training. And that's why I want to do like this video series for caregivers to just give some short videos to say like, here are some mind techniques, here's some body techniques, here's some spirit techniques, pop a video on, see if you like it, give it a try, see if it helps. Some tools are going to help all the time, some are going to help none of the time, and some help some of the time, but I think the idea is to keep that mindset open to like what's going to help me right now, because I'm not going down with the ship. I'm determined to stay in as much inner peace as I can manage, and I from that place, there's sparks of joy then that you find. So that's long-winded answer to your question, but those are just some of the things that have really really helped me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that's I what I find interesting, because, and maybe it's just because of the particular niche I'm in. It seems like a lot of folks focus a lot on like how can I change my person with dementia when in I know you're laughing at that, but it's such a common thing.
I didn't
When,
realize
when, when,
that. I'm like, really?
yeah, but yeah, when in reality, the person we have the most control of is ourselves. But
It's the
and sometimes you know
only
what
person you have control over. Let's face it, the only person. You
yeah,
may have the illusion of control. I mean, certainly I do take care of Ben physically in that I make sure he's fed, but I don't have any control over him at all. Uh, so, yes,
yeah,
please, everybody, please go with
yeah.
their flow, go with your flow, go with their flow, find ways that that can blend together because, yeah, you're not kidding.
Absolutely. I know. And you were talking about acceptance earlier as well. I think truly, especially if you are dealing with some of the stuff you're talking about earlier with some of his earlier symptoms,
Oh,
I'm sure all the things are evolving, especially with Lewy body dementia
yeah,
specifically. I'm
it's
sure all the things
intense.
you're seeing are evolving, but yeah, acceptance is huge because probably the colloquial way a lot of us know of it is like picking your battles.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, and I just say, yeah, I try not to battle at all. And the way I say it is like, go with Ben's flow. That's the
Mm,
only flow here. I mean, I might as well just go with Ben's flow. I mean, and it's it makes it so much easier, I mean, now I'm not saying it wasn't horrifying those first 18 months because going with his flow then meant I had to go stay in a hotel,
mm,
and I was scared for myself. I was scared for him because I didn't know if he could take, I didn't know if he was going to burn the house down. I mean, I alerted the chief of police and the fire marshal to say, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm not saying any of this lightly.
yeah, of
I'm
course.
not. It's important that that your safety and the safety of your loved one is paramount. And if it's at the point, I would never fault anybody for placing their loved one in a
No,
facility if that's going to be better for their safety. And I was close to doing it. Now, and I may have to make that choice at some
yeah,
point. I don't know because the future's in God's hands. It's not in my hands. But moment by moment, this is where we are. He's safe. The people that have been taking care of him, when I can, have been amazing. And, the resources are out there. There's I really believe that if we're willing, to stay open to how we can, again, take care of ourselves and take care of our loved one. I mean, it's just the other thing, and I will say, I'm not sure if this is if anybody in your community is still doing this. It's like, please remember that their reality is the only one they know,
mm,
and they can't change that.
sure.
And so, when I look at things from Ben's perspective, it it's much easier for me to know how to help him stay comfortable and to keep his anxiety down. So don't use reason. Like, my goodness, reason is out the window. And the truth of the matter is, all of the good behaviors you would want in any relationship are just now magnified in dementia. Because think about it, can you really ever change somebody else's
Yeah,
opinion about something or change their point of view? Yeah, like, not really. I
yeah,
mean, we were married, we've been married for over 40 years. We've been together for 50. I don't think I was ever able to change his point of view.
yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it too, though, is I think maybe something a lot of folks have as far as like maybe children or folks with disabilities. I think a lot of us almost think of like we need an authoritarian person to like show them who's in charge. Maybe some people of an older generation think that way, but yeah, it's so true. It just you weren't ever going to convince somebody of something they didn't already believe
no,
before they had dementia, and you are
no.
most certainly not going to do it after.
Now, and people that feel like they have to tell their loved one the truth, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? I don't, I mean, I really work at not lying to Ben. I don't like that. I don't even like that
Sure.
idea of therapeutic fibbing. I just don't like that term. It's just disrespectful in a way. But when he says something about wanting to go home, I'll say, "Hey, can I go with you? And what do you want to do when you get there?" And and or if he talks about his mom or his dad being alive, I'm like, "I know they love you so much. Remember when your dad did this or your mom did that?" And I mean, now granted, Ben's and dementia would be considered very advanced at this point, but even early on, I realized pretty quickly that there was no convincing him of something different, even in
Mm,
the early stages. So it was a real dance, and I say
yeah.
that every caregiver of someone that's living with dementia should take an improv course, like a theater course, because
Yeah.
you're just kind of dancing as fast as you can, their way, but
Yeah.
you got to just love them right where they are.
It's so
Mhm.
true. Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. The therapeutic lying feels a little icky. I think of more of, you're not contradicting what they already believe.
Well,
You're being consistent with their reality
yeah.
is how I like to think of it. You're going with that, and sometimes asking them, like, I love how you ask him some questions about what it is that he believes. So A, you can learn more, and B, sometimes that within itself just calms them right
Oh
down.
my gosh, and it's like, and I have to say, I don't like the idea of distracting them either, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
taking a different approach. Like, what if I approach it this way instead of that way? So it does take a moment, and for me too, I like to look right in his eyes
Mm,
when he's expressing himself at all. First of all, I like to see the light in there because it
yeah.
reminds me he's still in there.
Yeah.
And then it gives me a moment, like it gives me, like, I'm not as reactive that way. If I look right at him and listen to what he has to say and repeat back what he just said, it gives me time to think about which way to go with it.
Mm,
Which is, quite honestly, those listening skills are helpful with anybody,
sure.
but
Sure.
especially when somebody is saying something that part of your brain is saying,
What?
that's not true and it's not reasonable and what,
Yeah.
and so, but I learned, and maybe it was because those first 18 months were just so intense and I was on eggshells all the time, and I was scared all the time. And I guess I'm so grateful to be in my house with him and not be being asked to leave my own house,
Sure.
that it's in some ways it's gotten easier to just be with him right where he is, and then, you know, yeah, go with his flow, whichever way it seems to, it seems to go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think of it too as like I think a lot of us, and you guys tell us, let us know in the chat, if you can relate to this. But I think when we hear some crazy off the wall thing, like at 2 in the morning, he like opens up your door and it's just like, I need to go back home to mom and dad. It can be very easy to be like, oh God, fight or flight.
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
no, that's not reasonable. Like, no, you can't do that right now. Like, it's so. But yeah, I love how you just are like, all right, we're gonna take a beat just to repeat back what he said. And I even like my thought too is like, just get curious. Just like, don't be such in a rush to try
Yeah,
and like make the behavior go away, make the comment go away. Just get curious about it. Maybe he wants to go home because he's looking for his shoes and he can't find them. Maybe that's all
listen,
you got to do is just
you
show him
have
to his
no
shoes.
idea, right? Don't
Yeah,
don't don't take it verbatim either. It's kind of weird. Like, you got to go, like, what else might be going on here?
sure.
And I've also recognized too that for me, and especially with Lewy body dementia, communicating with Ben is so much more with my body language, my tone of voice, and my pacing.
Mm,
You mentioned about slowing down, because they're processing at a much different rate than we are. And
yeah.
so when I slow my voice down, my body language down, and just be with him instead of, as you said, reacting, right away.
Yeah.
Um, I'm much better able to access the next best thing to do, which kind of takes us all the way back to self care for caregivers, because
Sure.
my nervous system, I admit, was so on
Mm,
fire those first
mm,
18 months that I was very reactive, and I admit it's a challenge. But now doing these techniques that I do every day to keep calming and regulating my nervous system does help me then to make much better choices with Ben. I can think more clearly. I'm not as reactive. And I'm a lot more creative, honestly. So it goes back to what we just said. You can really only take care of your nervous system. You
Mm.
can't really take care of anybody else's. It may seem like, we do if we give them meds or this or that, but you can regulate your own. And when we take responsibility for that, then our ability to respond becomes much greater. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, absolutely. It just, yeah, I think that's such a great way of looking at it. I think so many folks look at caregiving as this is the problem in front of me and I got to solve this problem. But yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, it's all about, how can I get myself to a place of calm and peace so that I can respond
yeah,
to what's in front of me versus just reacting or,
reacting and, like you said,
yeah,
fixing, changing, managing it. I'm not saying we don't have to problem solve. We do,
sure.
for sure. But you're going to be able to come up with solutions much better if your nervous system isn't on fire. And which goes back to some, when you asked me earlier, some of the other things I do, is my diet the greatest? No, but I really do. I've got bottles of water all over the house so I can grab one, and stay hydrated. Like at least getting a green drink in me once a day, having at least one solid meal. I mean, there are things that we do need to do. And hey, for me personally, I mean, I don't like to take pharmaceuticals to in terms of anti-anxiety agents or antidepressant. I'm not saying they don't help some people. For me, it's a lot better to really be putting some of these other things into practice because they're a no side effects, and you may not get that initial reaction, but over time they really do add up to, I'm just going to say, more inner peace. As kind of crazy as that sounds, it really does, and helps me to handle all of life better. I mean, caregiving is one of the best opportunities for really discovering how to cope with life. I mean, we've all got intense stuff going on, not just caregivers. It's kind of a crazy world out there these days. So um, I almost would say consider yourself with an amazing opportunity to put some things into practice that are going to help you handle everything. So
Yeah. I love that that's another way you're looking at caregiving as an opportunity versus just something that was thrust upon you.
I know and look, I pray daily for a different perspective. I mean, I've got friends that are taking cruises with their husbands and, traveling and doing all the things that I thought I was going to be doing with my husband at this point. I'm not saying I don't shed a fair amount of tears. I do, but this is my journey. It is a choice. And since I chose it, I'm going to do it the best I can. And it's another reason why I'm so grateful for following the God nudge to start to share our journey, because this community that has grown up, I mean, your community and mine, I mean, they're amazing
Yeah.
people. And I'm doubly privileged to be able to connect with other people, to remember I'm not alone and neither are they.
Yeah.
And I always, I often end my videos when I start to go a little brain dead. I'm like, together we're stronger. Together we got this. But it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something as well where I think genuinely the number one thing I will hear in the workshops that I've done, and I no doubt know that in the workshop that you're going to be putting on as well, that you're going to hear the same thing. Like a lot of caregivers will look around in that Zoom room and they'll see, like I think the last first day we had like 1,000 people
Oh,
there. It was crazy,
good for you.
and
That's great.
everybody looked around and was like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was alone in this."
Yeah.
There's so many people
Yeah.
like even just having other people that really get it can
Oh,
just
it
really
helps so
cleanse the
much.
soul.
Yeah, it helps so much because I love it when people go like, oh yeah, I know how you feel. Like my dog had dementia or something, and you're like, okay, all right.
What?
I'm sorry, like, no, you don't really get it. And yet, it's like I said, and, and that's what I love about the community too. I mean, people are so, sensitive to the fact that um, it's different having a husband with them, a spouse, it's
Yeah.
than a parent. For instance, I mean, look, I don't know what it's like to have a parent with dementia. I mean, the truth is, I chose to be with Ben for my life, and so there's a certain aspect of that that helped me to come to acceptance. I mean,
Hmm, interesting.
I did take care of my mom for just a little bit towards the end of her life. That had its challenges, because
Sure.
I was running down to her house, and it did involve my siblings and everything else. In some ways, we don't have children. I don't have anybody else that I expected to help us. It's my show and Ben's show, so, and as I said, I made the commitment to be with him for my life. And this is the phase of the journey that we're on, so, um, yeah,
Wow.
all of that has helped me, you know.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, all perspectives are valid on that. It's so interesting that that's your perspective on it, that you see that as like a positive thing. Because I've heard definitely other folks when they talk about the difference between caring for a spouse versus caring for a parent is that it feels way more intense. Like the grief is more
Well,
intense when it's a
that is.
spouse.
Sure, because I expected my mom to go first, and everything, and like you said, so yes, of course, and also, if you have your spouse with you and you're taking care, they can often help you. So I mean, yeah, I would probably argue to say I would prefer it if it was the other way around, but
Sure.
I think I'm just acknowledging that that really has its challenges too. When you're like, wow, I didn't
Sure.
sign up for this. My mom's 102 and I'm still taking care of her. So
Sure.
I'm just acknowledging that that's got its challenges that I don't know. And so that's why I like to be very careful to say, like, this is just what I know. I'm only sharing what I've learned and what I can speak from my experience. I don't really know. I can't walk in anybody else's shoes, but there's aspects that we share, and that it does help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, uh, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you have a little bit of both of the perspectives there with caring for a parent versus caring for a spouse. I guess, like, what are some things that have helped you caring for a spouse versus like caring for your mom, even though you did with your mom for a short time?
yeah, sure. Well, I think, I mean, one of them is that, let's face it, with my mom, I was running to her house. I was spending 3 and 4 days at her
Oh,
house,
wow.
so I was leaving my own husband behind. I mean, now to tell you the truth, I'm here. It's Ben and me. And I don't have any other responsibilities or relationships that are as important as the one is with Ben. So my family is important to me and my siblings and everything. But hey, Ben's my priority. He's my husband. So it makes it easier perhaps to make some of those decisions caring for, I don't have the added conflict, let's put it that way. When I was helping to take care of my mom, you know, I was leaving my husband behind for 3 and 4 days. So as I said, in some ways I don't have that issue. And certainly, just I mean, I guess this may be a small thing, but because body language is the way Ben and I communicate the most, it's a whole lot easier for me to be affectionate with my husband. And
Mm.
so it's it wasn't the same thing with my mom. She wasn't as touchy feely, for instance, and that was not a way, as much as I wanted to, I think I used to scratch her back and she did like that, but with Ben, since words aren't really the best way for us to communicate these days anyway, I can communicate a lot more just by holding his hand, and we could take rides in the car and we just like being together. So there's a certain intimacy, I guess, that was certainly is there with your spouse that's lacking with a parent that you can use, to help care for them. And so I think there's that. As I said, there's also, there was certainly just trying to align things with my siblings, with my mom again. I don't have any of that. And that's the other thing I would say, for those that are taking care of a spouse, don't listen to anybody else who's not walking in your shoes. I mean,
Mm,
just don't listen to anybody else. I'm sorry. It's like, I'm sure we don't have children. So again, I can't speak to that, but I did have some my own family members. Ben doesn't have any family, but I mean, if people aren't
mm,
living it, just say thank you for sharing. I will take in your advice because a wise woman or a wise man has many counselors. Certainly you can take in their input, but you make the decisions for what feels right to you. And that's the other thing, as I said, I think with a spouse, it's the two of you. It's your life. It's not your children's life. It's not your siblings' life. I mean, it's your life with your spouse, and that's just the way I've handled it. At least, as I said, I was, and I'm grateful because my siblings, there was some challenges early on when they thought I was in denial. I was honestly just confused, and but we worked through that. And but at the end of the day, it's my decision with my husband. So I'm not sure
mm,
if that answers your question, but those are some of the differences that I've seen, and just to the other thing too, though, and this is not this is maybe a little bit off topic, but I've wondered about this. If we did have children, I would not keep it from them either. I
mm,
mean, I've heard people talk about, like, oh, I don't want to burden the children. I would feel like they would have a right to know and would want to interact with their parent um, while they can, So, and again, I'm sensitive to the fact that since I don't have children, I can't say for sure, but to me, it's first of all, it's nothing to be ashamed of. That's the other part of it too. I mean, this is something, it happens, it can hit people from all walks of life, from all financial, backgrounds, from all, you see it, you see celebrities. I mean, it's like there's no shame in it. And so I think it's really important to communicate to your loved ones, but listen to your intuition, at the end of the day.
yeah,
So,
yeah, that's great. Absolutely. Yeah, and I saw some folks in the chat that were uh, commenting that they definitely agreed with you. The unsolicited comments are hard, but yeah, I guess last question would be, what advice would you give to somebody who is just starting out on their journey?
um, get all the legal stuff handled.
Mm,
Um, yeah, all of a sudden I was like, would have preferred to go to something a little softer, but thankfully I got power of attorney, and I have an elder care attorney that I can call on and everything. So I got that piece of it handled early on because that could honestly be a nightmare. So that's an important thing. Um, Beyond that, quite honestly, I think it's tough to make plans because you just don't know how it's going to go. I mean, you just don't. So, kind of back to what we said early on, start to network, start to take a look at what resources are in your area. I mean, the Dementia Society of America is a national organization, they have local chapters, Alzheimer's Association. Start to look at what resources are available for you so that if you find yourself in a situation like mine where it was almost emergency, like overnight, you know where to go, and so that you can manage the crisis if you find yourself in one as best as possible. And start really thinking about how you take care of yourself now, because if you're early on in the journey, um, you cannot you can't afford, I mean, self-care is not a nice thing, it's an absolute necessity. And start to take a look at your habits. How are you taking care of yourself? How are you interacting and communicating with your loved ones? It doesn't have to be real serious, but it's important. Let's put it that way. It's important. um, and recognize that this is, a choice. I mean, well, I guess I'd say decide what your choice is going to be. If you're going to choose to stay and be a caregiver, then remember to take care of yourself first, and start to learn how to do that, um, so that you have the strength and the energy for the journey.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so
Oh,
much for
I
joining
hope it's
us.
been
And
helpful.
it absolutely, absolutely. Um, I see someone in the chat saying it's necessary.
Yeah.
Absolutely, to take care of yourself. So, yeah. For those, I guess, who are my audience, where can they find you?
Uh, Dementia Coach Diane is my handle on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and yeah, Instagram, of course. And then my website is www.dementiacoachdiane.com. So you can sign up for my newsletter. As I said, it's free. There's a link in my profile. And that way you'll be the first to know about some live events I actually have coming up. I've got a doctor coming on next week who's going to be talking about the use of cannabis actually in dementia patients on Tuesday. Dr. Sulak on Tuesday the 10th, yeah, at 5 o'clock p.m. So we have a live, and then I have my osteopath is actually going to be coming on the 20th to talk about self-care for caregivers in terms of supplements and different things to kind of lengthen our fuse. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll find out about those events and the caregiver workshop that I'm going to think about it first. In fact, I'm going to take some time to take care of myself and really do some praying and some meditating and see, how to take this out there with something though that we could really build together and customize it to meet the needs of this very, very special group.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, and again, if you guys are part of Diane's crew, I also have a workshop on how to deal with challenging behaviors. So if you're looking on some practical how-tos, that's in the link in my bio. So with all
Kristen
that
does a
being
lot of
said,
good stuff, so please, yeah, check out her workshop. She's
yeah, September
it's like I'm just like,
17th
wow,
through
well, that's a good
the
idea.
19th. So that's coming up. But oh my goodness. So yeah, I guess moral of that story is there's a lot of incredible resources out there for caregivers. And
Yes, there are.
Diane,
So
again,
thank
thank you
you
so
for
much
being
for
a part
joining
of it
me.
for all of us. Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Of
Thanks.
course. Thanks for coming and your time. And everybody, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.